You've been wading through the many hundreds of pages. Let's start, though, with Transnet. It's the period 2010 to 2018. And this is the time when Malusi Gigaba was Public Enterprises Minister. He appointed Brian Molefe as CEO and Nosh Singh as CFO, and also Siyabonga Gama as CEO of the Transnet Freight Rail. So just paint for us the picture that is emerging as you go through this report on what happened at Transnet during that period.
Well, Sally, some of the recommendations are clear that the police should investigate those three officials for a list of crimes ranging from corruption and racketeering to fraud and basically negligence. It talks to some of the issues that I've read through the report, talking about them accepting cash bribes at the Gupta family compound. Another one is breaking the PFMA Act numerous times. Also misled Transnet board about a multi-billion rand locomotive contract, and also deviated from the National Treasury procurement laws. Another one is mismanagement of Transnet finances with unjustified price increases. Of course, that would talk to those three procurements that looked at locomotives. I understand it's some 1,259 locomotives that were procured at over 60 billion rand. I remember one specifically, the procurement of 1,064 locomotives, and that initially was supposed to cost 38 billion rand. Of course, it was inflated, as we've seen in the report, a number of times by 16 billion rand, to be more specific, to 54 billion rand. So some of the grievances that we've seen over those 8-year period from 2010 to 2018, when, of course, at the helm of Transnet was Brian Molefe as a CEO in 2011 to 2015, and Nosh Singh from 2011 as a CFO to 2015, both of them coincidentally moving to Eskom.
Yeah, and of course, we're yet to hear all the full details of state capture at Eskom, but just focusing now on the second report. So you've explained Transnet and what the report calls extensive wrongdoing being found there. Denel, of course, the state arms manufacturer. Just tell us briefly what you've been able to read about Denel.
You'll find out in the report that it was actually performing quite well when the state captures basically moved in. We understand Minister Lynn Brown changed a board completely, except for one of the executives there, completely a board that was performing quite well. In fact, Sally, we are told that the turnaround strategy came in to Denel that wasn't performing quite well in the early 2000s. And in fact, by the time that these board executives were fired, they were actually making significant progress and even making profit. So it was quite eyebrow-raising, something that she confessed herself, that these members were actually performing quite well, not giving clear indications as to why then they saw the boot. In fact, we found out how even the former Public Enterprise Minister Malusi Gigaba tried to sway in the then CEO Saluji of Denel into just adhering to the Guptas, mentioning that these are my friends. That in a meeting detailed at the Sexon compound, at the first meeting basically, where the then CEO was called in by Mr. Essa to those Gupta compounds. So it tells you how these dealings were then going on, and if you did not adhere to those meetings and basically the way forward, which was the then state capture, you were then booted out, essentially. The similar fate that was suffered, we've heard in the previous report by Temba Maseko, after not adhering to the Guptas, and then replaced by Mzwanele Manyi at the GCIS.
And I mean, we've now got two weighty tomes of like sort of 700-800 pages each, with a third one due later in the month, pulling together 4 years of testimony and investigations. And it is, I have to say, what I've basically finished the first one, and it's very well written. It's very clear. There's been a lot of energy put into it, and there are very clear recommendations that corruption charges should be pursued against Malusi Gigaba, for example. I know that you've been talking to the National Prosecuting Authority. The ball is starting to fall in their court now, but there's so much to go through. Any indication from them how soon they can act, how much these reports are going to help them in putting the culprits in orange overalls?
Seemingly, Sally, will only start seeing teeth really at the end of February. We are told at this current stage. In a phone call that I had just had with Mthunzi Maga, NPA spokesperson, suggesting that at this stage a task team has been set up, but really no meat in terms of going after these culprits that we've been hearing of over the last 3 years. Of course, now we've seen 5 volumes of that state capture report, and we do understand the last installment of this report will come at the end of February, the 28th of February. Government has made a clear stance that it will not even give public comment at this stage up until it has received the report in its entirety. So that's something that we'll be then expecting, and of course President Cyril Ramaphosa to hand it over to Parliament by June with his clear directions on what he'll do. But of course, NPA telling us at this stage, Sally, that they'll only act properly and go after these culprits at the end of February, most likely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that update. Keep reading. eNCA reporter Aviwe Mtila, who's wading his way through the second tranche of the state capture report, which is looking into Transnet and Denel.